Hi, we are Rebekah and Casey Vallance. We're both architects with Cox Rayner Architects in Brisbane, Australia. This is our own house, which we designed straight from our university days. Designed and built during our time at Cox Rayner, this is a house which fosters a number of key design philosophies pursued within the practice. The house is located... Sorry.
We seem to have a little technical issue.
Is it this one?
No, it's working now.
Right. The house is located in Brisbane in the historic inner city suburb of Paddington. This suburb derives its character both from its hilly terrain and from its well-preserved collection of the traditional local vernacular housing type known as the Queenslander. These subtropical timber and tin houses were derived as an economic response to both climatic and topography constraints. However, as you can see in these images of Paddington, the compact layering of these traditional houses, as density has increased over time, and their organic ad hoc placement in response to the undulating topography of the suburb has resulted in many steeply sloping and underdeveloped leftover spaces between buildings. It was one of these leftover spaces which Casey and I purchased in 2003 as Paul University graduates. Our particular leftover space was sandwiched between a heritage dance hall and a historic cottage, and contained an existing timber cottage and a significant number of site constraints. With the requirement to retain the existing cottage, encroachment and access easements due to the two neighbouring houses being built within the site's boundary, and a sewer easement to allow for all neighbouring sewerage connection through this site, the buildable land was so restricted to a predominant width of 3 metres. It is a site, narrow, steep and constrained, that no one wanted when put to the market. However, apart from appealing to Casey and I due to our limited finances, it occurred to us that inner cities worldwide are dotted with such sites, which by nature are affordable, and if designers can resolve them, the potential for the social diversity that might come from developing such sites for living encouraged us to explore this opportunity. This is the upper and lower level plans with the street on the right-hand side. This shows the existing cottage to the street with the extension to the left occupying the leftover footprint. The plan is arranged as a linear sequence which unfolds into a journey, beginning with our own studio positioned at the entry to engage with the street and culminating in the classical elevated rooftop deck. Utilising the sloping topography, we conceived the landscape as a folding ground plane, sleeving in beneath the house for continuous and direct engagement of house and landscape. We also explored the vertical spatial opportunities offered within this very narrow site. The right-hand drawing illustrates the rather disproportionate scale of the old dance hall and our humble cottage to be retained, with only cosmetic changes allowed, a further constraint of the authorities. Oops, sorry. However, the characteristically steep topography of Paddington enabled Casey and I to explore the vertical opportunity of the site while observing an even further site constraint of height limitation, as you can see in both the house and elevation. The house unfolds along the site from the retained cottage at the front through an architecture that splits in levels and culminating in the rooftop deck which opens out to the suburb. The house is designed as a series of layers that are employed both for climate protection and visual privacy, considering the compactness of the site.
Now I'd like to take you on a journey through the house. Each of the plans are colour-coded, showing the area being described. Our whole approach was to reinterpret and optimise the value of every element within the house, exploring the value within each due to the extreme tightness of the site, as seen here in the entrance and how it speaks to the public realm, to the intimacy of the arrival hall. This has led to a very crafted approach. Turning within the arrival hall, the journey is dramatically introduced, with the clarity of the linear spine revealed and a sense of yet unrevealed layers to be experienced. As you begin to move through, the house splits into bridge and atrium volumes. The layered architecture now erodes, filtering the atrium with light, revealing the intimate landscape as it folds beneath the house, forming the garden and terrace, and revealing views to the distant hillscape. Within the atrium, the boundary wall transfigures into a delicate screen that protects the space from the western sun while allowing visual permeability. The atrium space becomes the heart for living, utilising the stair as a social space. The atrium is like the leftover space within the leftover house, because it inhabits the area between the house and the boundary and acts as both room and landscape. Equally important in the narrow dimensions of the space was to amplify the experience vertically by inhabiting the atrium volume with crafted elements. Returning to the bridge, also the library, which connects the old cottage along to the living room, the sense of optimising the available dimensions becomes even more apparent. The living room hovers over the atrium and acts as a nest in which the screening system offers the ability for the space to feel intimate or, by contrast, open up the living area and its kitchen like a veranda overlooking Paddington's hillscape. This space hints at the house's main vertical circulation spine. Like the atrium, the staircase also amplifies the experience vertically as a light shaft that funnels daylight down to the lower bedrooms, and as a clerestory to the sky, again employing crafted elements to emphasise the verticality. The vertical layering is equally cared about in the external open spaces, with varied openings revealing framed glimpses to both objects and life within, and looking up beyond to the rooftop deck. The final discovery in the journey through the house is the rooftop deck, from which the drama of the outlying topography is fully appreciated, again belying the constraints of the site.
It is the screen that makes all experiences possible. Conceived as a delicate curtain, this plate-thin layer of perforated steel opens and closes to alternately protect, afford privacy and outlook, and offer varying degrees of engagement with our close-by neighbour. The relationship with the neighbouring cottage is reflected in the patterns derived for the perforations in the curtain screen by translating the shadows of the peeling paintwork on the neighbouring cottage wall. These perforations generate a wonderful, ethereal quality of light within the house, which can be experienced in this short film we've put together. Our leftover space was an opportunity to reinterpret the value of every element, its purpose, place and detail, to enrich the experience of occupation. Such leftover spaces are opportunities to reinterpret our engagement with both natural and social context. The world's leftover spaces are opportunities to create highly amenable living environments of richly layered experience. The crafting of this house and the maximisation of what can be made from the leftover spaces of our cities became such a devoted purpose for Casey and I, we constructed this house ourselves, notwithstanding our finances precluded any other way. The leftover space house is a manifestation of what can be created in a world of unlimited leftover spaces that might otherwise be left as just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring presentation and to lead off our morning. I actually, just to lead off, have a question. I think the house is very dynamic, obviously with the moving screens and the way it works on the site. My question is, in terms of foreseeing this over time, having just moved in it and so forth, you're inhabiting this in different ways, but do you foresee change of your design from the outset in terms of how you might strategize your family grows or other aspects through different seasons, etc.?
This project that we're presenting today, for us, is actually a decade of work. We've actually started this 10 years ago, and it was interesting as a design process for us because we're actually at that point we're starting to think about maybe we'll have a family, and what was really interesting for us was designing for the future of what memories we could actually create for our family that will be within that. So it's actually a really enjoyable, and I think it's one of the joys of architecture to actually allow the space to now be used by the family. We've got two little girls, obviously one on the way, and to actually see them occupy the house, and where we designed the stair, say, as a space to occupy, to see them actually want to create performances down on the terrace and actually use that as an amphitheatre for us to sit at, or for them to go and gather a book and from the library and sit within the dappled light and read the book, or call out through the house. So it's a real joy to actually see that. In terms of the growth of the house, at the moment we're actually seeing that it's sort of fulfilling the dream that we had of it. I suppose there's always, because we're involved in the construction aspect of it, there's always this sort of enjoyment of actually being involved in the house and seeing it sort of grow. But it's that dream of actually creating something, and now creating memories for children, I think, is what's so joyful about it for us.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting and very porous. The house seems to open up on every surface from the sides to the top. So my question is really about, could you speak to the relationship again, which you mentioned a little bit, between your house and the neighbors in terms of, visual connections or acoustically, how is that played out in the design?
It's very interesting because one of the charms of living in these houses where they are so close together is, in a way, we were celebrating the fact that you are close together and the noise. When we first bought the house, we spent the first year living in the front existing house, which is literally built on the street and right beside the neighbours. And it was very interesting because every morning you'd hear the walkers go by and you'd hear like a sentence from their conversation, and that was a part of the joy of it. So we weren't trying to, in a way we were trying to celebrate that. So we do hear that, but then the variety of spaces that we've created within the house, it was very much a design consideration to create places to retreat to as well. So when you're up on the rooftop deck, you are completely removed. And as we said, it belies the constraints of the site. It really does feel like you are up in the hillscape of Paddington, just hearing the birds chirping. And so there is this real sense of varied experiences acoustically. And the idea of the screen and the permeability, it really does celebrate the connection with our neighbours. We can actually interact through that screen. There are certain views where we can talk to our neighbour on their deck, but there is also that aspect of retreat and screening. So you can very much feel like the screen allows you to live in that space.
Well, what I like about the house is that it's this machine-like aesthetic. It looks it's pristinely finished, but still looks unfinished. So it's the hairiness of the aesthetic really to find attractive. So for me, it's like a machine, if you like, for living, as Corbusier says. And what intrigues me are the operable bits in the house. Now, can you just go through again which are the operable bits in the house, and whether these are operable by hand, or do you have some some device for moving them.
We don't have a picture, but yeah, it's all manually controlled by hand. None of it's relying on a mechanical system. There's both fixed and sliding components within the screen, and what we've done is with the fixed components, we've designed it so that they can actually both, from a design point of view, allow views through to particular objects, including the neighbours or within the hillscape, but also funnel breezes, northerly breeze down within to the actual atrium to create an air movement within. The sliding components are particularly in relation to the living room area, where we actually wanted to both control permanent visibility through to the neighbours, so when we choose to, say, have a more intimate space, we can slide it away, or we can completely open it up where you actually don't even see the screen within the living room, and it becomes essentially a veranda overlooking Paddington. At that point, we can completely communicate with the neighbours quite openly, and again, that actually opens up the space to the breezes and views quite a lot. So it's all mechanic, it's all hand operated.
I thought it was lovely. I'd like to live there, I think. Can you talk a little bit about the climate of Brisbane? I'm afraid I don't know. Is it semi-tropical?
Yes,
or
yeah.
So you're not really in a winter condition
No.
at any time. You talked at the beginning, you set the context as being sort of a drawing on the vernacular of the region. And yet it seems somehow quite anti-vernacular if you look at the surrounding buildings. Can you have a little word about what the sort of what bits you were riffing with and which bits you were sort of not, what you didn't deal with? Thanks.
We were, obviously the use of timber and lightweight materials was tying into the existing context of the traditional, but obviously reinterpreting that in a new way. One of the ideas we were trying to explore was the idea of the leftover space as being the shadow between two buildings. And as with a shadow, it's dark when you first move into it, but then as you move through it, your eye adjusts and the quality and the crafted or the character of the space reveals itself to you. And so it is with the house, the idea of this dark facade that is quite unassuming and humble from the street. Once you move through the house, the experience and the varied richness of the experiences that can be appreciated as you move through the journey reveal themselves throughout the house.
But one of the, just briefly on the construction aspect, the original housing type that we referred to as the Queenslander is a timber constructed building with quite simple sort of engineering principles. But they're actually, the house that we're connecting onto is 100 years old and essentially was built at a low cost at that point in time, completely out of timber. And the techniques of joining that they'd used were essentially overlapping and wedging the timbers together. And from our point of view, because we're also going to building the house out of timber in techniques that we were able to build with ourselves, we actually thought was a really nice connection back to what the original technology that the original house in the area would have been building with, and again using all local materials, which is what the original house would have done. So there's a connection between the two, both in terms of materiality, but also the techniques of building of what they were capable of and what we were capable of.
And also what we were capable of building ourselves. So.
Really got better over time.
Compliments for your very nice house. I have a very simple. What do you like most upon your house?
About the house. Well, obviously the atrium space is really, I guess, the heart of the house. It's where the landscape and the house connect and interface, and it really is the hub. But what we, Casey mentioned earlier, in being able to build the house and take our time and labour over it for the last 10 years, obviously when we started we didn't have a family, but we had ample time spending every weekend labouring on it to talk about and discuss both how we wanted the house to be experienced and then how we might achieve that through the actual crafting of the space and the detailing of the space. And so what has been the greatest joy is seeing our children use it. And now we have 2 little girls and another one on the way, and just to watch them enjoy the spaces, because as architects the greatest joy or what really drives us is to create spaces that enhance our everyday experience of living, and the rich variety of spaces that we've been able to achieve on the site, and the way I guess our children have embraced that has been such a joy to watch.
Lovely note to end on. Congratulations. I'm going to invite Christopher Barger from Grower to present the award with Ken Tadashi Yoshima. Beautiful project, lovely way to start the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.